Hey, you made it back. Good to see you. Welcome to part 2, in which we're calling it cutting and scoring. So for this, you're going to need a couple of simple tools to keep the project going. You're going to need some sort of a foam cutter. I use a hot wire cutter. You're going to need an X-Acto blade or a sharp cutting blade. You're going to need some Mod Podge, and you're going to need a hammer. So right off the bat, I'm just jumping into it with my hot wire cutter, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow that Sharpie line more or less, and I'm going to ride that Sharpie line on the top, and I'm going to angle the bottom of the wire cutter in somewhere between 30 and 45 degrees along the bottom, and I'm going to sort of jump it and skip it and give it sort of a rough, uneven edge. And in a second, I'm going to bring the project more back into focus. I'm sorry about running it sort of off the screen there for a second. There we go. I'm just following that line carefully, and then in a moment, we're gonna put the undercut on it. Now you'll notice there's some rather large scrap material that I'm cutting off of this. Keep that around. That's gonna be valuable in the coming steps. So just put that off to the side. Do not throw it away. And you can see, now that it cuts away, you can see the rough outline of that leading edge that I have for the front of the diorama piece. Remember, I'm not cutting the back of it. The back is going to be left untouched and squared off so that I can build on top of it. Now, every part of a diorama build has sort of the difficult parts to get through, the parts that are less exciting than others. And rough cutting and doing all of this type of work can be a little bit monotonous, but it's worth it. Take the time to do it right. It's the base of all your success. And if you can get through these relatively boring to watch parts, we've got greatness, greatness ahead of us, because there's really nothing but fun coming up. So now we're going to take the hot wire foam cutter and we're going to make a couple more passes. We're going to undercut what we've already done, and that's going to give it that sort of shadow line or that floating finished edge that I always talk about. And then the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to do it again, and this time we're going to focus more along the top, and we're going to add just a little bit more fine detail, because the top of the diorama, when you sort of undercut and then add a little bit more of a finished leading edge to the very edge of it, it really helps make everything pop. And again, this is where you can really put your own stamp on it. You know, we're not going to press a button and have a perfectly finished product. This is how you add your own personality to it. And so just take your time with the foam wire cutter or whatever kind of cutting implement you have. Take your time and make this be almost like a signature for you. And this has become my signature for my dioramas. And what I'm doing now is I've turned it upside down, and I'm going to take the hot wire cutter and then go along the very bottom. And doing the same thing along the very bottom will allow it to really sort of let it stand out, and almost as if it's, like I've said, floating from the surface of the table or whatever surface it's on. Really gives it a professional finish. You know, if you're ever following a recipe in the kitchen and it'll say like seasoned to taste, that's essentially what we're doing here. You can stop at any time. When you're satisfied with it, it's done, right? I'm gonna continue to tweak this a little bit. And now what I'm doing is I'm just sort of illustrating that professional edge along the bottom. When we put some paint on that and put a shadow line on it, it's gonna give it a really unique finished look. But I've decided that I'm going to go a little bit more in detail along the top, add a little bit more definition along the very leading edges. And then once you get that edge to where you want it, then what you need to do is you need to thinking about the surface features. So a diorama is always built on a horizontal plane, and if you think about any horizontal plane almost anywhere in the world, it's not ideally flat. There's always surface textures, features, divots, holes, all kinds of things. And so what we're doing is, it's time now to look at the whole piece, and before you start building on it, you want to start adding textures that will enhance the overall look. And what I've decided to do with this one is turn it into sort of, remember we're on Hoth, so there's going to be a snow, but that snow on the base is going to be slushy in parts. People and troopers and equipment will have rolled over it, so there's going to be almost an iciness to it. You know, as the snow warms and compresses and freezes again, there's going to be different colors. So what I'm doing here is I'm starting to rough up the surface and I'm gouging it. I'm gouging it with my X-Acto blade, and there's really no rhyme or reason to this, but what I want to do is sort of establish almost like a frozen puddle. If you were to imagine any sort of facility in which equipment comes and goes, there's almost a frozen puddle, and that's what I'm trying to do. And this is where the hammer comes in. So once you gouge out the surface to your liking, there's just a little bit too much definition. So now you have to go back with some sort of blunt object. I'm using a hammer. And you're gonna actually knock it down in the middle. So you wanna kind of even it out just slightly. And then once you get that to your satisfaction, knocking down all the high points, then you're gonna wanna go over the whole thing with your Mod Podge. Now the Mod Podge is gonna act as a sealer coat. So remember, you're using a foam, a compressed foam. So you can't use anything that's not water-based, otherwise it's gonna chew through it and eat it. So I'm using Mod Podge, which is gonna seal all the cracks and divots, because that realistic resin water that I just showed you on the screen is caustic to the surface of the foam. So what we're gonna do is cover it in the Mod Podge, make sure it's all sealed, and we'll get ready for the next part. Thank you.